rusty wheels and knew I'd take her home. I brought her to my farm in an Amish neighborhood where simple living's valued. She'd be loved and understood. I put her on a treadle stand and coaxed her wheel to turn. I felt her joy and easing with my study and concern. I cleaned her and I oiled her, showed her off to all my friends, repaired the hurts of years and let her sew again.
Hello everybody, welcome back. So this time I'm going to be putting this beautiful little Davis vertical shuttle back together, but I'm going to get started with the bobbin winder, and it's a little different than a Singer bobbin winder, and I usually skip this part, but since it's different, we're going to go with it. So the first thing I'm going to do is put this bracket on, okay, and if you look at the orientation, here's the springy part. The little part with the dots is facing towards that springy part. And on this side, I am putting in this big shouldered screw, and it has this washer that is curved towards the bracket. Okay, so I'm just going to get that started here, and it does twist through. This bracket is threaded, so you can't just pull it through, you have to turn it through. On this side of the bracket, there's going to be a flat washer, and then this nut, and it's curved on the outside, so the outside is obviously on the outside. And I need to change out that bit, but let me change out that bit, get this screwed in, and I will be right back. Okay, and this is a 1/2 inch nut, so I am tightening it up. But because this was a shouldered screw, even when it's completely tight, you should be able to move this bracket, okay? So with that, I'm going to go ahead and put my little sweetheart cog back on top of the main one. It's got this tiny little flathead screw that's going to go into that lower hole. Okay, so that is on. Now there's another screw. Looks like this. It's going to go from the top through, okay? And this round part needs to fit inside of this hole here. So what I'm going to have to do is back out this screw just a hair. Just a hair, she said. Okay, so that it's a little bit flexible so I can move it back and forth so that that will pop through, okay? Now that that is set in, so it's nice all the way through. Okay, I want to make sure that that little flat part is pretty much level with the back of this cog. Then I can retighten this. Okay, so that is ready to go. Okay, so now that that is on, I'm just going to pop it through here. Okay, and I want to make sure that this can turn well. All right. So that is good. It's turning as I want it to. There's a nut that goes on the back here. It looks like that is on the outside. It's just a little flat nut, and I need to get that tightened up. And I want to make sure when I have that nut tightened that I can still turn this. All right, so the next piece that's going to go on is this little bracket here, okay? On this, there's two little nubs. Those nubs have to be outside of the little sweetheart cog. Okay, so like here, hopefully you can see, the little nubs are resting against the big cog. All right, and this slot goes over that screw that we just put in. Okay, this rotates over this way and comes down like that over this hole. Okay, so with all of that in place, I need to get the screw that goes through there, and it's this one with a tiny little shoulder, and that shoulder fits inside of this hole here, and get that screwed into place. So I got it on, and I'm just rotating this with my hand again to make sure that this piece is actually going to be moving back and forth, because it needs to go back and forth this way. That's what that is for. And it looks like it is, so that's good. If you go to turn this and this is wiggling or it's bound up, unscrew this a little bit, because that means that you don't have that shoulder completely over the wide part of the screw. Okay, so that's looking good to me. The last screw here is for mounting this onto the machine, so I'm just going to set that aside for later, and we will put it on towards the tail end of this. Okay, so with that done, I'm going to start underneath. Get my pieces out here. If you remember, oops, I'm going to need to put this on quick just because that little bar is coming out of its baggie, which I don't like. So I'm going to put that over here. Okay, this piece, that's what I was looking for. Those two little washers, they are going to go down here. So let me get this machine flipped upside down so we can see what we're doing. Okay, so this is the bottom part of our machine, and because it's a vertical feed, meaning there's no feed dogs or anything like that, it's actually more simple on the bottom than most machines, but more complex on the top. So let's see here. I need to get this a little bit of oil in here and on this shaft. I want to show you there's two sets of ball bearings in here, and they were filthy and gunky and everything. How I cleaned them is I put them in my ultrasonic cleaner with a degreaser. I put a diluted amount of purple power. If you know purple power, I threw that in there with some water. And it was able to get them pretty darn clean. And then what was still stuck in there, I could come back with a pick and just flick out. So that worked pretty well for me, because I did not want to do anything that was going to jar these loose. I wanted to keep them far away from a rotary tool. So there was two sets. This one, it goes up on the top. This one is on the bottom, and I kept the bottom one with its little, or wait, no, I'm wrong. This is the one for the top. The other one is the one for the bottom. But as you can see, this rotates inside of here, so I'm going to put a drop of oil in there. And the same way that these ball bearings are rotating here, the other set is going to rotate down there. All right, so what I've done is taking that little ring of bearings, okay, I'm putting the balls towards the machine, the flat part out, okay, making sure that's going to rotate smoothly, and it does. Then, taking my shaft, I'm going to slide that over. Oops, I need to make sure that this is kind of centered over that. Okay, that's looking pretty good there. And then I'm going to be putting this, remember it's set in there this way, on top here, screwing it on. Come on. It almost feels like it's cross-threaded, so let me back that out. Try it again. Well, anyhow, while I figure that out, I need to go ahead and get these little washers put back in. So there's a flat side and a side that a little ball can sit in. This screw needs to back out all the way. I'm going to back it out a little bit more here, because I want this space to be open as much as possible. So I've got one there. This one goes up on top. Oh my goodness. And I need to slide it over this little ball right here, which is the tricky bit, because you kind of have to put the washers on the ball and then slide the bracket over it. So let me play with this a while. It's just a matter of getting it slid under, sliding this on top of it. Lower it a hair. Okay, so at this point, if you can see, I got those washers in there. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and tighten this screw up enough that it's going to hold them in place. Okay, I'm going to put a drop of oil on those washer ball areas there so that it's going to want to turn easily. Oops. Oh no, oh no. All right, give me a minute. I need to put this back together. Okay, so I wanted to show you a few different things. One, I've got this tightened up. This is, you know, finger tight at this point, holding in that bearing. And you want to make sure that these bearings are in flat. If that little part with the bearing is cockeyed at all, it's going to throw things off. So make sure that, can't see, that these little bearings that you can kind of see, I'm straightening them out with a pick, those are flat before you get this tightened up. Then this little part over here that is the bracket for holding the shuttle is really, really tight. And it's going to want to sit a little bit higher than it should, but you need to smush it down all the way, that way, you know, these two together, or else when you turn this, it's going to knock into that plate. Ask me how I know, but at this point, we are all good, okay? So I'm just going to add a little bit more oil, put this little nut on here, okay, it's shaped so it can just slide over that piece. There's another nut that goes on top of that, this one with a curve. It looks like that 1/2 inch one I just did on the bobbin winder, so wouldn't that be nice if it was the same? I'm going to get this tightened up and then we'll flip it over. And while I am down here, I'm going to go ahead and get this little piece in. It's just this little bar and it's got a couple tiny screws that go in either one of those holes. I'm looking at this piece, and the only thing I can think of that it does is when the shuttle carrier, it's not focusing, when the shuttle carrier is going back and forth, you know, the shuttle is going to be sitting like right about here. It might act kind of like a support for that little exposed shuttle bobbin case area as it goes through there. That's the only thing I can think of right now. I'm going to go ahead and get her wheel put back on while I am here. So I have a tiny screw, the big nut, a washer, and my wheel. My little temporary magnet over there. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and put just a bit of oil on here just to make everybody happy. Pop this on. Okay, get that oil smoothed off. I'm going to put a drop more up here. Alrighty. So then we have this going right here. And I just realized I made a mistake. Usually these wheels are turned inside, and so this is running up against the inside, but on this wheel it's to the outside. And I purposely did not paint this little part here because I thought it wasn't going to be visible, and I thought it was rubbing up against something, but it is not. It is not, unfortunately. So I'm going to polish that up the best I can. Pull this off here. I'll polish it up, put a little slight clear coat over that little bit just so that it's never going to want to rust or anything, but oops, things happen. If you're curious how I'm going to do this, basically I've got one of these little Scotch-Brite rotary pads and I'm just going along the edge. You can see how shiny that is now. Okay, I'm going to do that all the way around it. It works pretty good and I can control it fairly well. I just take my time, okay, and it's going to clean it up really nice. And also, in case you're curious, when I have to just clear coat a small part or something, I just use this. I use a different clear coat for my main machines. I use that big finish one and the sprayer. But this works fabulous for doing small things. And honestly, for doing entire machines, it works fabulous too. So, you know, highly recommended. But I have that wheel over in my little paint booth area to dry, so I'm not going to touch it until tomorrow. So I'm just going to go on with the parts down here. Okay, so looking at her nose now, if you can see, everything is moving freely. The can't show you right now, but there's a little knob underneath here, which is turning this. This is the stitch length. Okay, it's fairly stiff, but I think it wants to be, so it won't untwist on itself, you know, but it's definitely twistable, it's just stiff. Anyhow, we will deal with that when the time comes. What I'm going to try to do is kind of like the reverse order from how I took it apart. I'm going to put it back together. So this is the thread take-up lever. This bearing travels inside of a little crevice in here, and I need to go ahead and get this into place. Will it be that easy? Yes, it was that easy. I think that's a miracle. Okay, so the bearing is in the crevice here. On this side, I have this big screw with a big shoulder on it. That's going to come in from this outside area here, through that hole, and tighten it in. I want to show you, as I'm screwing it in, I want to make sure that this is still going to rotate well, okay? Because it would be very easy to get the little collar of the screw pinched on here. So if it feels like it's binding up, back it out a bit, wiggle so everything comes back into place, and then try it again. All right, and now it's moving up and down freely, so I have it set well. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and try to get the tension mechanism put back on there, if I can get my camera to stay put. I just reviewed my video when I took her apart to make sure that I have this going back on in the right order, so I've just laid my pieces out. Now, when I was taking her apart, this was so grungy that was kind of trapping. That piece that I just dropped on the floor. Okay, it was kind of trapping this in place. But now that they're both clean, you can see it should pass through without a problem. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get this post screwed in here and get that tightened up first. The way I do that is I put the little nut on it, put something flat in the middle. This is probably not the best tool for it. And then I can stick it into the slot and rotate it without worrying about this, you know, coming apart. So now that that post is screwed in well, I can pull my little nut off. This part that's sticking out, there's a little hole in the discs that is going to slide over. Okay, so there's that one. And then this one that has the tension release. So when you want to release tension, you just push that with your thumb. Okay. And then this is on sideways like that. And, oops, wrong way. This has one side where it's coming out a little bit, one side that's flat. The flat part goes towards the spring. Okay. And if I push this, it is releasing the tension, so I'm going to call that good for right now. Another thing I want to do before I get too far into this is there's this bracket that goes along this outside edge over here, and it was a real mess. So I've cleaned it up. So here's the thing, on the bracket, unfortunately, the good part, or the part that was against the machine, looks a lot better than the part that's on the outside. And that is just pitting where the rust has eaten away the metal, you know. It is what it is. Sometimes we have scars. So that's going to go over here, pop onto this post, and then there is a screw that goes up here, screws in up here to hold it in place. And I'm just screwing this down. Yeah, we're just going to tighten it up all the way, I think. Okay, so there it is. So when I lift it up, that is what it looks like from the front. There's going to be a lot of things that don't go up here. They go in the plate, and I'll show you all that, but I wanted to show you, I did take out and replace this thread guide and that thread guide already. Okay, so they are in. And this, if you remember, we left it in because I did not want to hammer onto that pin. It just did not look like something I should do. So at this point, this is what we look like here, and that's what we look like there. Okay, so at this point, I've got a few different things going on. First, I have my presser foot, presser bar, and its accessories here. Okay, so that's what it's looking like first. Then I have my vertical feed. It's basically a walking foot. Okay, so that's what this is looking like right now. It should actually go over here. And then I have my needle bar. Got my needle stuck in a piece of sponge there. So we have this, and there is a bearing here, which is going to be traveling in this slot, and it's going to be stuck onto this little nub. So actually I could probably just pop it on there. Okay, and as a part of the needle bar system, I actually have this little piece here. Okay, and this is going to go, get this on here so I can see, oops, wrong part, sorry, no wonder it didn't make sense. That's going onto the plate. So there's a lot of things I'm going to be putting onto the plate. I might as well just get started there. This is the bottom, this is the top, this, oops, I think I have that correct. Okay, it was the wrong screw, of course. So this one has a little shoulder in here, which fits in that spot. Don't know why I grabbed the other one. It makes no sense to me. But I need to get this screwed into place here. And again, as with anything with a shoulder, you want to make sure that shoulder is centered in there, because the shoulder is going to allow this to move even though it's tightened into place. I need a smaller bit. So as I tighten, I want to make sure this can still wiggle. And actually, if I hold it upside down, it might be a little bit easier. But I'm just going to turn it a little bit. Make sure, yep, we're still moving. Turn it a little more. Make sure, yep, we're still moving. And so if I need to make an adjustment, I know exactly when. And that feels better. I tried it once before and it didn't. So, okay. So even when this screw is tightened up all the way, this can move back and forth. That's what I want. All right. Okay, so now for the presser bar, there's a slot here in the casting. This sticks through there, okay? Make sure that can fit through there. Actually, I'm going to put a little bit of oil, because I don't want that to be too snug, you know? And pop that back, and you want the screw to be exposed here. So this is what, if you push up this little lever, it's going to actually lift. And because we had so much rust in things, I just want to make sure that this is going to move up and down freely. I think it will. I think it will. All right, so I'm just kind of lining that up with this hole. This foot, remember, this is the back of the machine, so I'm aiming the foot towards the front. Just going to slide it up through here. Sliding it up through there. Okay, now there is a hole right there, okay, in this lifter lever that I'm lining up with that. And if I lay this carefully down, there's a tiny screw here that needs to go in there. I'm not going to put that in yet because I have to back it back out and put the spring in. So if I can pull this back down. Oh, you know what? I think that spring fits from the top. That wasn't really necessary. Ah, yes, my life. Okay, so popping this back into place, lining that hole back up, and now putting this screw in. And I'm going to use my handy dandy screw starter. Yay, thank you. Okay, getting that started and cinch it up. So because there's that hole, there's only one place you can put this, so we automatically know that we have the right height for our lifter lever, which is nice. Not gonna lie, that is nice. A lot of oil there, okay? But you can see it is sliding up and down that slot well. And when it's down and you lift this up, it pushes it up, okay? So now with this on there, my little finial, I'm going to give it one more quick little polish, and then that's going to screw into the top. So these are my latest love. I bought a boatload of them, like 100 pack off Amazon. And they come in so handy for cleaning out little pieces. They're just little mascara ones, but wow, they're handy. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and push this in and start the threads, and I can tell it was threaded about halfway up the floor, so I'm going to get it about to that point right there and then stop. Okay, so if I lift this, I do have enough spring for it to go up and down, so yay. Okay, I am going to be replacing the original needle in here because it did work, but I'm using my camera. Looks like that number's caught up. Looks like 30-40. Says boil or boy 30-40. Okay, so that's the size needle, the boy 30-40. I love using my camera to figure out needle sizes. Now here's the thing, I did go ahead and clean up and polish the tip of this needle, and I think that it's lovely and sharp and clean, so I don't see a problem with reusing that. But just to let you know, that is the original number size. I don't know if there is a contemporary that is compatible or not, but yeah, it's good. Let the zoom back out, but before I put that in, switching parts out, I'm going to be putting this in. This does have a walking foot, and this little slot here is going over that bearing, okay? So if I can lay this in place, put this piece over that bearing, okay, so that as this wants to move up and down, this foot is going to go up and down. See down there? We'll pretend it's actually straight. That should hopefully give us the action that we need. Okay, there you go. That feels a lot better. So next to this walking foot part, what's going to hold it in place from not wanting to move everywhere is the needle bar bracket thing. Okay, so it's going to slide in here. Come on. And that's what this little round bearing there is doing, is it's keeping everything moving well. All right, so down here at the bottom, you can see where the needle goes in. I'm just going to back it out a hair and put this in the flat part of the needle going against the flat part here, and it can only go so far before it has to stop, so I'm just pushing it all the way up until it hits that point and tightening it up. Okay, so I want this facing out and going in place here. Come on everybody, play along. Okay, great. Now it's in place. I need to point out one thing. This slot in here, that is what this bearing is traveling in. So I'm just putting a little bit of oil around that bearing, because depending on where the needle is where this walking foot is going to be. There we go. Okay, so if you can see, as I move this up and down, that moves that piece. Think of it this way, all right? Okay. Okay, so I am trying to carefully hold all this with this hand, and I have a little screw that goes in here and I believe it's going to come through and keep this pushed over against here. Okay, so trying to hold it so that nothing comes apart. Get this pushed into place until it cannot go any further. I think I'm going to need to get one of my little small screwdrivers to finish this off. Okay, that feels like it stopped, and you can see here where it's been pushed all the way over against here. I want to make sure it's not too tight, and yeah, it's too tight. I can't move this bar up and down, so I'm going to back that screw out just a hair so that it's holding it in place, but it's not going to trap this. Okay, so it's all a matter of making sure that this has a little bit of freedom of movement. If I just twist it a quarter turn, what happens? I can still move it. How about another quarter turn? I'm good. Oop, I'm not good. So that's the position right there that I need. Any tighter than that is a bad move. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to need to put this onto the machine. And this here needs to go inside this part. I'm going to go ahead and put oil in here, because once I get this on, I'm not opening this up again. Hopefully, maybe famous last words, but hopefully. I'm going to go ahead and turn it so it's all the way at the bottom so I know where it is. And holding all of this into place, I'm going to try to get that set. Oh, that's a bad move. I'm going to put it at the very top. All right, I've moved it to the very top. I think that'll be easier. So if I move that to the top and set all of this on, and I'm looking at it sideways, can I get it so that little bearing is in the slot? That felt kind of right, but not exactly. Let me play with it for a minute. I think I'm going to need to do it this way, where I just put the needle bar part in first. Okay, and I have the needle going through its slot down there in the plate. And then keeping an eye on where that bearing is, because it needs to slide into here. Holding it all together and trying to get it into place. It's not in there yet, but I discovered that there's absolutely no way you can do it unless your stitch length lever is up right here. Okay, so make sure that is up. This big bearing here needs to be able to fit into that slot. So in addition to flipping this over, holding this in place, we need to line up that bearing into this slot and this bearing into that slot. Okay, so I think I have it on here. I am not going to take it apart again and show you. But what I ended up doing with the lifter lever up, everything in here, and the cog that the needle bar travels on down, I kind of like put the needle into the hole and tipped the whole thing up, and then wiggled it until I have something that looks like it's matching up. So if I'm turning this, that's the key. Will it travel correctly? And it looks like it does, but I need to get it all secured. So let me try to put those screws in and see if it works. Okay, it wasn't quite right, and I learned something else. This part on the side, this is a spring that is going to come up against here to hold this all nice and secure. So I actually loosened it up so that I had a little more play to get this set in place. I think I have it now. I'm going to put the screws back in. If I do, then I can put my spring back so that it's going to hold that nicely. So I want to show you, I think I've got it in here correctly at this point. Let me tighten this up. Okay. Now, I've got my lifter lever down, and I wanted to tell you, I actually appreciate them putting this spring out here, this little screw that was adjusting that little pulley inside outside, because they've kind of made this thing so that the fine-tuning adjustments are visible from the outside and you don't have to open this up again, which is good because I honestly don't want to open that up again. I think that, you know, it is what it is. But I've got my little spring back here over against there. So let me see if I can do this so you can see. As I turn what will be the wheel back here, I've got my lifter lever down. The needle goes down. As it lifts up, this foot presses down, the walking foot lifts up and goes back down again, okay? Now it's not moving very much. I'm going to go ahead and turn my stitch length all the way to the other side. And now you can see the walking foot's taking a much bigger step, okay? So when you have a longer stitch length, the walking foot will move more. And when you have this knob back here turned to 0, then that walking foot part's going to pretty much just go up and down, okay? So this is looking pretty good. I'm getting pleased with this. I'm going to go ahead and put the bobbin winder back on. Let me get I have a little piece of something somewhere here. Okay, I'm going to pop a little piece of wood down here to hold that. And my bobbin winder is going to screw on right there. So here it is. This is the front. Oops, I have it backwards. This is the front over this way, okay? Where all of these little nubs are, that's going to kind of give it some grip. So that goes up against the machine. And go ahead and get this screwed into place. I'm not going to tighten this up all the way until I'm actually fine-tuning things, because I want to be able to place where all of this is. But this should be able to rotate. When all is said and done, this should hold pretty secure, okay? But this part rotating. But at this point, I don't know which angle to put it at, so I'm just going to kind of lightly just leave it in place here. I don't think I've shown you the inside. I cleaned it up best I could. It was very rusty, and now it's moving very freely, so I'm as happy as I can be with that. So I'm just going to go ahead and put my block under here to hold that up, because I want to put her little back plate back on. Okay, so there's a little nub down there that it fits on. I think it's adorable this way. And my little baggie labeled back plate, so I don't forget what this single screw is for. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and pop that on up here. Okay, so that is good. Back plate is on. With the back plate on and the front plate on, I am going to, you know, I'm still waiting on that wheel where I had to do a little bit of a touch-up to dry. So I'm not going to be able to finish this entirely until tomorrow, but I'm going to go ahead and pop the shuttle in. If you can see, it goes right in here, just to make sure that's going to travel correctly, because there is an adjustment I can make on this little holder. It's actually looking good. It's resting against that swoopy part, but it's not binding on it, and if I really push it, I can move it. So I'm thinking that might be okay. I'm going to go ahead and slide the plates on and then just walk away until tomorrow, and we will finish up and do all the fine tuning and everything at that point. Let's get that back up in place. So I'm going to show you, these are the little plates, you know, they look a lot better. I love how they had the old, you know, cotton size, or the thread size. There was rust on here, some rust damage I just couldn't do anything to fix. But in general, I think it's really nice. So if I can slide this in here, fabulous. And the back one, if I can slide it, remember the backs are always more sticky than the fronts. That's just the way it is. I was able to push it easily about halfway, which is good, but I'm going to go ahead and get my little razor blade and make sure I have everything cleaned out in there. Okay. There was a little bit of paint in there and I just got it pushed on, so what I do is get an X-Acto knife and come in very carefully in that groove, looking very closely, and clean it out. You know, you don't want to chip up stuff on top, but from underneath. That works. So there we go. Let's see, how many baggies do I have left? I have this that goes with the wheel, and that is it. So we're going to take a break. I will be back tomorrow, and we will get her finished up and timed in. Okay, so welcome to the next day. I've got her wheel on, and we're going to get started just seeing if we can make her go. I wanted to show you, remember there was a little screw over here that this bracket was attached to? Once I set it here, I tightened it up where I thought that it would work well with being able to engage this with my belt. But if, you know, wherever it ends up, that isn't appropriate, you can always just unscrew it just a little bit, raise this little bracket up and down a bit, and then put it back in. So just popping that in there, we're going to start off by trying to wind a bobbin. So let's see if I can bring this shuttle forward. And working around my camera, try to lift it out. Okay, so here is my little bobbin. Okay, so what I want to do is get my thread secured first. And I usually start it on this side, so I'm just going to hold the little thread. I don't know if this is the proper way, but it's the way I do it. I put it over the end here, kind of like that, if you can see. And then I trap that thread inside this little dish over here, pull the springy part out, and lock it in place. That way this is going to be somewhat secure there. Then the thread goes through. Oh, it popped out. Hang on a second, let me pop it back in there. Get in there, little thread. Okay, so then through the top of this little finger, and down here there's a little hook. It goes through there and then back up to thread. And I am turning the clutch wheel to loosen. Okay, and I am thinking I may need to tighten something here, but we're going to give it a shot anyway. Okay, definitely going to have to tighten something there. Yeah, I've got issues. For some reason, this is not moving like I want it to, and I think that is because this screw down here, this cog isn't engaging as much. See how that wiggles? I need it to engage a little more with these threads. So let me make that adjustment and adjust this so it's not going to flop, and I'll be right back. Okay, I think we are good now. Just like on a Singer, this little screw here, it's eccentric, so when you turn it, and remember there's a little nut on the back, but when you turn it, it's going to raise and lower this cog up against the threads. So that's how you make the adjustment. You want it close enough it's going to fully engage, but not so close that it's going to bind up. I wanted to show you, I took apart back here the order. When I took it apart, this washer was over here, but I put it in between these two because I think that's going to give it the firmness it needs. Otherwise, this is just going to flop all over the place. So with that, I'm putting it back in, and this bracket here is coming down. Oops, it's coming down at a fairly steep angle there. And I'm just going to lightly cinch that in. So now I should be able to tighten this up to where it needs to be. I don't have this nut tightened up yet, but when I do, I have to put this, there's a screwdriver slot over here and a nut, and they tighten together. I should be using my wrench, but I am not. So now this has a lot more firmness to it, you know, and then I can adjust this with those little circles that are sticking out on it. Is going to give it the firmness it needs. So now, hopefully, when I want to engage it, it's going to hold still really well. And then, hopefully, when I'm not, I can bend it in. I still have enough room here between the wheel and my little bobbin winder. But over here, it should be out enough that it's not going to engage. As I say that again. Out enough it's not going to engage. Huh. Well now, what in the dickens? I may just have my machine placed, because you can see I just kind of set it there. And again, based on where your belt is, you can adjust this screw here for the placement of where that arm is, so that wherever your belt is, when you're not wanting to use it, you can back it in. When you do want to use it, you can bend it out. Okay, that's the thought process here. So let me go ahead and get that little bobbin threaded again, and we'll see if it works. Okay, so let's see here. Just ignore my squeaky treadle wheel. Is what it is at this point. Okay, so no hands, hands free, and it's threading up pretty well. I'm not going to fill the whole bobbin up. I just wanted to make sure that this little finger is going to move all the way back and forth and put it on there evenly, and it looks like it is. So let's call that good. Pop off my bobbin here. To put it into the shuttle, well, here, I'm going to trim that little extra off there. You want the thread to come around like this. So if you're holding it, bring it in front of you this way. All right, getting your shuttle. There's little slots here. I'm putting it in so I can bring that thread down the slot. There's a little finger. Sometimes on these old guys, you have to put your finger on the top so that that little bobbin's not going to spin as you're working on it. Pull it down until you hear it snap, and then when you lift it up, look right there, you can see the thread coming up over that little part. Okay, that's what I want, and I want to be able to then pull it straight up and see the bobbin turning. Okay, so with that, I'm going to engage, tighten, okay. Turn my little shuttle so that it's forward here. Here we go. This flat part goes against the swoopiness over here. And I have not tried to sew on this yet, so we are hoping for the best at this point. Okay, let me go ahead and get this threaded up on top. Okay, she sews. I actually tried it off camera for a minute because I wasn't too sure exactly how this is going to work, and it works great. I just had to adjust the tension a little bit. So right now I think I have it balanced for this thread. And so I wanted to show you her in action. So if you can see, it's a walking foot. I'm going to have her come down this little strip here. Right now I am at her widest stitch length, and down here, this little nub that's sticking out, that's what you line up with the number. This is the number for the stitch length, okay? So when it's turned all the way towards you, this way, I put oil on it, that's why there's oil there, that's the longest. Turning it all the way away to 0 is, of course, stitching in place. So I like it pretty long. I'm going to bring it over here between 7 and 10, okay? That's actually not that long, to me at least. I'm going to back it out to long again. And this is noisier than it will be in its own cabinet just because I have echoes with everything going on and stuff like that. But I also want to point out up here, It's really important to keep oil in these holes because this one here, remember there was that little brass tube, and that is oiling the slot between this needle bar and the walking foot bar. Okay, it like has the tube going down there, so we need to keep that nicely oiled, and all of these. So one more time, let's get a look at her. Okay, now remember for tension release, when I, oops, move my camera, when I want to pull my thread out, I lift up the presser foot. This little thumb here, that releases my tension. So I can pull that up, get my thread in the right place. I'm hoping I haven't released my tension yet. All right, why aren't you coming loose? Hang on one sec. I want to show you something. While I was figuring out the tension release, I completely forgot this. So this little hole here, it's for oil. And there's usually a tiny little pinhole that goes from this inner to this outer area here. Very, very tiny right there, okay? So what I did is I just took a little strip of red felt that's the right height, and I am rolling it up, and I'm going to put it into this little hole here and just saturate it with oil. Okay, the idea is that little piece of felt is going to work like a little containment wick. And once it has enough, hopefully a tiny bit will come out of this hole that I'm pointing at right there, okay? And there's just, I put a tiny bit there anyway. So the idea is that when this shuttle goes past it, it'll pick up a tiny bit of oil there and then bring it back and kind of self-oil itself. But that's a point that you're going to need to make sure that you keep a supply of oil on. That looks pretty darn saturated to me. Okay, let me go ahead and get it threaded up one more time. Okay, so I need to tell you, I ran into a couple little issues that I fixed now. And what was happening is the shuttle was locking up in here, you know, that plate I couldn't remove. It would be going and all of a sudden it would lock up. And what I figured out that it was is I had this bracket. There was a couple things. First of all, let me pull the shuttle. Well, I've got to clip threads. But on the back of this bracket, there's a little spring, and that was not loose or tight enough. Let me pull this out so we can see what I'm talking about here. Okay, so pulling my shuttle out. Back here, there's this little flappy part. That was pushed all the way back, so it wasn't really working like a spring should work, okay? And what was locking up is there is a little groove in the casting right about here where the needle goes up and down. And this shuttle was pulling out, kind of falling out and getting, that tip of it was getting locked into the groove, you know, and it wouldn't go anywhere. So that was an issue. So between pulling that out, so it's going to want to stay in more, but then I also had to push the entire bracket out more so that this circle would cover most of the top, because it's going to want to fall towards the little, see, pushing it in here. It's going to want to fall towards the swoopy side there, okay? It's going to want to fall towards this edge. So I needed to move the bracket out so that this round part was more over this edge. So I moved it out maybe 1/8 of an inch or less, probably 1/16 of an inch. And that worked great. And that was just that screw underneath here where the bracket is. And then I also had to adjust the tension in the shuttle, which is this little screw here. And it's handy because you can actually do it while you're so it's like if it's, once you have it set, it should be good as long as you don't change, you know, your weight of thread dramatically, you know. But to the right is tighter, more tension, to the left is looser, less tension. And I think I have that good now. So then, can see, it makes a good stitch. Now with the tension on this machine, it's like it kind of has to get used to it. So if you make an adjustment, run stitches for about 5 or 6 inches and it'll settle into the new tension. And then you can see if you need to change it again. It's not an instant. It's like it needs to think about what the new tension is for a while. So yeah, it's working great now. Very happy about that. So lifting the presser foot, pushing this. Oops, I need to get my needle up out of the way. Pushing that, everything pulls out. Putting this, so we've got stitches, you know. You can see where I was playing with some different tensions and everything. But very doable, very, very doable. The longest stitch length on this is not very long compared to a lot of modern machines, but it's very workable. So I'm just going to play with it a little while longer, make sure all of my bugs are worked out, and we're going to call it good. So I hope you liked it. I hope you like this machine. I know that she's set up a little bit different than a lot of standard ones, but I think that she turned out beautiful.
I found an antique sewing machine, forgotten and alone. I touched her rusty wheels and knew I'd take her home. I brought her to my farm in an Amish neighborhood where simple living's valued. She'd be loved and understood. I put her on a treadle stand and coaxed her wheel to turn. I felt her joy and easing with my study and concern. I cleaned her and I oiled her, showed her off to all my friends, repaired the hurts of years, and let her sew again.